Hey everyone, I'll be doing a review of one of this holiday's 2016 game releases, Dead Rising 4. I won't have any spoilers in this review, so don't worry about that. To sum it up, I don't think you should purchase this game at full retail price. I recommend that you wait for a significant price drop. We'll start by talking about the history of Dead Rising. It's actually one of Capcom's more recent franchises. First entry came out for the Xbox 360 and became one of Capcom's biggest IPs. As of recently, the Dead Rising franchise hasn't been doing financially well, as it did in the past, due to many controversial decisions made in the third and fourth installments. Dead Rising 4 is a soft reboot. What I mean is that they keep the protagonist of the previous games, Frank West, but he's actually the only returning character. This is in contrast to the previous game, Dead Rising 3, which actually brought most of the cast from the previous games. If you like to see the previous characters in the series, you won't actually see it in this game. The new cast of the game is interesting, but I don't believe there's enough character development due to the very short length of the game. You can beat the story within 10 hours, but that can be doubled or even tripled if you choose to pursue all of the optional content. There are positives to this game, and I do respect the developers for doing certain changes. For example, the game is easier in many ways. It's very difficult to die in this game. You don't have to spend much time micromanaging your inventory. Your health items are all standardized. They will all heal the same amount instead of being forced to spend time mixing juices like the old game. In the old games you could do many different things like cook the meats, mix juices together to get healing items that would heal more of your health. In this game, you don't need any of that. They will all heal the same amount. You don't need to be at workbenches anymore to combine items together. Like, if you've played the previous games, you'd have to go to specifically marked workbenches in order to combo your items, your weapons together. A lot of these changes, while controversial, these ones I consider to be improvements of life kind of changes. But I think that some changes take it too far. For example, you can equip what is called an exosuit in the game and mow down the zombies very easily, like if they were grass. It's silly, but it's not necessarily the same silly way that the old Dead Rising games did it. Like, when you look at this, all I see is a big metal suit. It doesn't feel like Dead Rising to me. Even though it is very out of place and funny, it doesn't feel like it fits the Dead Rising culture. I often hear people even making jokes about how this game is so similar to the Fallout franchise. It's not, but when you see Frank West wearing the exosuit, some people think it is. Some people who don't know much about the games will even interchange them and can't even tell the difference between them. Though I do really enjoy the very large variety of items, specifically the weapons, and all of the different weapons you can combo together, you have to be trying on purpose if you want to die in this game. Not to mention, the leveling system has been changed dramatically. What I mean is that they compressed the amount of experience needed to level up from one level to another. So you'll probably level up to 40 just from completing the story mode. I agreed that in older Dead Rising games that leveling up was too difficult and too grindy, but I feel that with this game the developers went too far in the opposite direction. Now they made it too easy. You'll have too many skill points that you'll be forced to allocate to different skills. It's not like the old games where each skill point would make a big difference. Now you're being given them like candy. So this game is another open world game, which is increasingly common nowadays. I do agree that the mall was too restrictive, and I like having a little city to explore, and like Dead Rising 3, Dead Rising 4 does have a little city outside the mall that you can explore. I like the optional content a lot as well, like the collectibles and the many challenges you can complete on the side. But like many other open world games, there's only so much you can take before it gets really boring and repetitive. Some even say there's too much collectibles in this title specifically when you compare it to the older games. I kind of agree with that. There are more bad changes with this game, and you're going to see the list of bad things increase a lot in this review. There are no more psychopaths in this game. For those of you who are not familiar with the series, psychopaths was a generic term used to call the bosses in the previous games. The bosses were just pumped up enemies. They're not generic enemies, they're distinct, unique enemies, characters who were sometimes integral to the story. These psychopaths in the previous games, if you've played them, you'd see that they would have the funniest cutscenes in the Dead Rising games, like Dead Rising 1 and 2. You'd see a lot of mall workers who have gone crazy due to the whole zombie apocalypse. You'd see crazy clowns, security guards, there was a tiger trainer. I know there was one in Dead Rising 2, they have a parody of Siegfried and Roy. It's really funny, you have to go look at those. And you see how characters can go so crazy, but at the same time, it wasn't taken too seriously. It was really funny, but it was something really unique to the series. Having a lot of these optional psychopaths are not the same as having a lot of repetitive content. Many would say that psychopaths were iconic to the series, and in fact, brought many people into the Dead Rising franchise. I showed a friend in high school a video of Adam the Clown, and people would be crowding around saying, "Whoa, what's that? I want to buy that game. What the hell is this?" Like, you know? They were so unique and iconic. It was one of a kind thing you'd see in Dead Rising games. I know that game development is not easy, and that sometimes game developers need to make many changes to make a game successful nowadays. You need to be able to get and to always get new people, new clients to want to buy the game, and sometimes you'll have to change the old formula to do so. But by not including psychopaths, I think they made a very poor decision. In fact, in this game, there's barely any bosses at all. Depending on your definition of a boss, I'd say there's only 3 bosses in the game. This game instead has what we call maniacs. Maniacs are not the same as psychopaths, they're just reskinned enemies. Maniacs are just reskinned enemies with pumped up health in a themed area. For example, some of the first maniacs that most people encounter are knights in a medieval part of the mall, but it's not the same. It's not the same as a unique character that's part of the storyline. You know, I know there's another instance where there are people, they're mall workers dressed up like pirates in a pirate themed area of the mall. These maniacs, and I hate to say it, but when it comes down to it, it's just groups of generic enemies. Yes, these groups of generic enemies will have a leader, but the cutscenes are non-existent now, and it feels like the developers didn't put as much work into the maniacs as they should have if they were trying to replace the psychopaths. And I hate to get to it, but the worst part of the game, and the reason I tell many people to wait on this one, is that it really atrociously handled ending. I'm not spoiling anything, but this game ends on a cliffhanger. But the problem is that the cliffhanger isn't even handled that well. One of the main characters will actually shove in your face and say, "Oh, too bad Frank's story's not over, he still has a lot to do." And you know, when the character was saying that, I was so excited, I was so pumped for the final chapter. And then when I pressed the button to move on to the next chapter, the credits suddenly appeared. I was so confused. I tried to enter the main menu again, and I checked Google, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Did the game actually end? And the rest of the game is actually included as DLC, downloadable content that you have to pay for if you want to see the storyline continued. Huh. Let me explain something though. The old games had something we called overtime mode. Overtime mode was an epilogue to the game. It was like an extra chapter. Like the game would end regularly, but then you'd have an extra chapter to complete. A lot of the times it wouldn't necessarily be continuing, sometimes it'd be a bit different, it'd be like a branch off of the main ending. And you get overtime mode from meeting certain conditions. In some of the old games, for example, you just have to rescue a certain number of survivors. But even if you didn't unlock overtime mode, you'd still get a coherent ending to the game. But that's not really the case in this one. This ending is not really coherent at all. I mean, it's sad because, you know, I remember many years ago I played Dead Rising 2, and I remember that overtime mode was offered for free. I remember when I got the original ending, I found out that there's optional content that you can unlock. You could actually get a separate ending and an even better epilogue to the whole story, all for free back then. And you know, to be honest, I don't mind if these developers made you pay money for extra content in the game. That's fine with me. But I'd rather they had actually a coherent ending to the game, like an actual ending that could end. Like, let's say we had an ending to the game, like ending A. Like, you could offer a DLC that either branched off that or even went further, but they shouldn't have done a cliffhanger ending. When you just play this standalone game without anything else, it just ends on a terrible cliffhanger. It actually leaves on a very, very bad note. I hate to say it, but everyone hates it. You Google Dead Rising 4 ending, and you won't actually get that many videos of the ending. In fact, all you'll get is a bunch of negative and very aggressive comments from the customers. You'll get a bunch of very, very sad comments from all of the customers when they saw the ending. In fact, there's many articles online from many of these gaming publications who criticize their developer's decision to choose to offer an actual ending as paid DLC. Sometimes you'll even find articles now about Capcom Vancouver who are defending their decision to do this. but I think that was actually a very low blow. The game's price, and not for that reason, but the game's price decreased significantly within just a few weeks. When people are talking about the game's ending, even before the release of the game, a lot of people are not going to want to buy the game. In fact, many people are actually going to wait to buy either the game used or wait for a complete package to be released because of how disappointing that is. I think it was a really bad decision from Capcom to do this. I'm very disappointed, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when we say that we're just so disappointed by how the game was handled. I'm sorry, but all I have to say is that I think that was a very, very bad decision from Capcom to do this. It's not the developer's fault. It's more of the publisher's fault for allowing this to happen. I'm sure the developers might not have wanted to end the game on a cliffhanger like that, but were probably told by the publishers that they had to do so. The problem is that the game ends on a very bad cliffhanger, and it actually turns a lot of people off from wanting to continue it. So that's my review of Dead Rising 4. I was very, very disappointed. It's very unfortunate that that's what they did with the game. You might be more willing to go into it if you're a new customer, but as a returning customer who has played the previous Dead Rising games, I was just really shocked and depressed by how they handled it. I mean, I respect the new calendars, new storyline, and yeah, it feels like a reboot, but it actually feels fun. You know, I'm not gonna lie, with the technological improvements, you can have so many hundreds of zombies on the screen that you can defeat. But when it comes down to it, it feels very repetitive very quickly, and it doesn't offer much uniqueness to the series as a whole. And remember that we're always willing to put out both walkthroughs and reviews of all of your favorite games. If you enjoyed watching this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks.